And my boss said to me, he said, if you put as much passion and energy into your work here as you did into your podcast and your hobbies, what he called it, you'd be really successful. That was like one of my last days at that job. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I should align my passions with what I'm doing for a living.
What's going on, Schmoozers? Greatly appreciate you tuning into the podcast that helps proud Jews promote their personal brands. I am David Cobbett, and you're about to listen to another amazing episode. Please make sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. I know I've said this a million times already, but this is so that we can continue to grow the show and have amazing guests. My next guest today is fresh off his WFAN NYC Sports Radio debut, which is the premier radio station for sports. He is also an avid Jets fan with 2 sports-related podcasts, including one with former Jets running back Bilal Powell, and he has worked with the MLB and Fox Sports in the past. Please welcome to my show, Rami Lavi. Rami, how are we feeling after your WFAN debut?
I'm feeling pretty good, and thank you for that nice intro, David. And yeah, by the way, do definitely follow the social, because that's how I found you, through Max Manis, who works for John Boy, a friend of mine. So saw he posted it on his social, and then I connected with you guys. But yeah, WFN crazy. I just posted again today. 3 years ago, I sent a cold email to Craig Harton, who's now, who I was listening to at the time. Right. I grew up listening to him. And then, he replied to that. I don't know what made him feel compelled to, but 3.5 years later, to be sitting in his seat and hosting a show, even if it was, 3 to 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, was still wild and a dream come true,
awesome,
for sure.
Man. And I'm sorry that this is you're going from the best of the best to now, a podcast that has...
No, totally not. This is, again, and by the way, when I started this thing, I had, I think only my father listened. I don't even think he listens anymore. But that was where I started, and I've seen it, kind of that whole journey. And the first thing I did when I got home was I recorded another show, because I had my fantasy baseball show on Sunday night. That's when I recorded, and so we had to do it. So you don't stop here. The work that got me here is hopefully going to be the work that continues to get me further in my career. So I'm enjoying that part of it too.
Oh man, I'm excited to talk some hustle with you today, Rami. I feel like you're a hustler. I'm a hustler. We'll get into some good conversations. But before we get into the hustle, I like to start all my segments with your Jewish geography profile. So we're just going to run down the list. I've tried to do this rapid fire in the past, but us Jews, we stick on one topic for 5 minutes and talk about it. Oh yeah. So we're going to try and make this rapid fire. Are you ready, Rami?
I'm just warning you, my Jewish geography profile, we could be here for 2 hours. I'm just saying that. All right, go ahead.
All right, Rami, hometown, where are you from?
And already the complication begins. So I'm originally from Passaic, New Jersey. My family lived in Israel for 15 years. I was there for, I want to say, 13 of them. And then now my parents currently live in Baltimore, Maryland. And I lived in Connecticut at the time. And I live in New York now. So yeah, all over the map.
Wow. A lot of the big Jewish metro areas, right?
Correct. Yeah. And my father's originally Israeli, hence the name Rami Lavi. That is as Israeli as it gets. So yeah, my father's originally Israeli. My mother's originally from Maryland. So, and my parents live in Maryland now, and we lived in Israel. So pretty much makes sense.
Rami, where did you go to college, and what was your major?
So I went to Israel for 3 years, and I was taking online classes there while I was there, and then I took some classes when I came home at Yeshiva University. And I was a liberal arts major. It was really fun. It was fantastic.
Very nice, very nice. And as a child, did you participate in any youth groups like BBYO, USY, NCSY, any of those, or did you kind of have a good solid group of friends where you didn't really need a youth group?
So I wouldn't say there were any youth groups that I was a part of. No, till when I was a teenager, I actually volunteered with High Lifeline. They are, okay. Again, they deal with families who are going through child illness and stuff like that. And so that was, I made a lot of friends through that. But really the summers was interesting. I spent the summers a lot of time in Silver Spring, Maryland, where my mother grew up. And so it was just me and my family, and I have a pretty big family, a lot of cousins and stuff. So we did our own thing those summers. But it was fun. It was wild. It might have been its own youth group, its own camp, you know?
There you go. There, exactly. Rami, who is your favorite, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, who is your favorite Jewish athlete of all time?
Favorite Jewish athlete of all time? It's a good question. Man, well, I just saw Jalen Brunson is married to a Jew, and actually this is going around like a couple weeks ago. Like he had like a regular like Jewish ordained wedding. So, I guess his kids would be Jewish. I don't know. He's Jew adjacent. I don't know. Can we count Jalen Brunson?
Listen, you know what? Listen, if he's marrying a nice Jewish girl,
Exactly.
in my eyes, he's Jewish. He's Jewish.
I have to say Adam Fox, though. I just remembered. Adam Fox,
okay.
He grew up on Long Island. I met this guy who was like, yeah, of course, I go to shul with his grandfather. You know what I mean? So,
Awesome.
Adam Fox is definitely a Jew.
Okay, that's a good answer. All right, now for the hot take, hot topic. This is going to be probably the most sensitive question that I ask you, Rami. What are the best bagels in New York City?
Can I go with New Jersey because I love Sammy's Bagels in
Oh, Jersey has better bagels, apparently.
No, I didn't say that. Okay, you want Modern Bread and Bagel. There's one in Soho near where I work. And at WFAN, and so they're fantastic. But I used to work last summer. I worked a seasonal job in Major League Baseball, and it was 10 minutes from Sammy's Bagels. And I would go every single morning on the way, especially Sunday morning, where there's a line out the freaking door.
Oh yeah.
And get a nice kosher bagel on the way to work. That is, I mean, I'm telling you, sometimes, and I'm not proud of this, but a lot of times I would get two. I would have one like on the way and then have one for lunch at work. So,
wow.
Wild.
Wow. All right. Listen, what was your order, by the way? What's your go-to order?
So it depends. Again, it depends where I am. But there, I mean, I'm going usually double toasted. I just like scallion cream cheese. Nothing crazy. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of boring, but if you're getting more into it with like, the egg and cheese and all that stuff, then obviously.
Yeah. No, I feel like keeping it simple sometimes is a good thing. Cause
yes,
I'm a big, obviously lox and cream cheese kind of guy, but then you go to some of these places and they're throwing on all these toppings and you're just like, what the hell? This isn't even a bagel anymore. This is like a freaking like $30 sandwich now. It's crazy.
Yeah. If you ever gone to like Russ and Daughters in the city also is the same type of thing where, all of a sudden you have your pastrami lox and different like things going on. You all of a sudden turns what is literally the most, I guess, simple of food, and that's why it's such a Jewish food, was because it was just like simple European food, and now you turned it into like a gourmet meal. It's like lox is not supposed to be gourmet. We're just trying to have a bagel with lox,
Exactly. So before we talk about your background in sports and what you're doing in the sports media world, I want to go into your Jewish identity a little bit. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your background as a Jew and how you grew up, and how has your Jewish faith, I guess, changed over time?
It's actually a really interesting question because growing up, it was more just kind of do what you're told. And my family was never like that. My family was always kind of follow your own path, find your way, whatever Judaism and whatever that means to you. And that was really cool. And I think it's different because, my dad didn't grow up Orthodox at all. And he grew up in Israel, but completely non-affiliated with Judaism, which is such a weird contrast where you're growing up in Israel where you'd think like Judaism is so prevalent, but, he knew nothing. And then when he moved here, it was kind of like, now I'm in New York, now I'm in Long Island where there's Jews everywhere, but kind of we have to make a more concerted effort to make Judaism a part of our lives. And so that was, I think, I don't know what his parents thought, but he decided on his own pretty much, hey, I'm going to make it more part of my life now. And then for me, growing up in an Orthodox home and then, also having that, hey, whatever it means to you, that's what you make out of it, was definitely something that to me, like I said, like Judaism means having and looking for a relationship with God, trying to find meaning in the world. And so that became very real for me, specifically when I started my career, because
Mhm.
in a career where there's no path, there's no blueprint, you're just trying to make it on your own and find new paths. Um, you know, it's something that you can lose faith pretty quick. Um, so trying to see some sort of divine intervention and trying to find meaning in what you're doing day to day. And then the biggest thing for me, and this is something that I got from my friend Johnny Lazarus, who was one of the first people who I reached out to, when I was starting up in this industry, and he texted me back, "Hey, Jews help Jews. And, we're a family and I want to help you get involved with, whatever you're trying to do in your career. I want to help you because I want to pay it forward. Someone helped me, so I want to pay it forward to you." And that was something that was like, okay, so now this can be my goal, to be extremely prideful as a Jew and pay it forward to the next person. And whatever the traditional quote unquote meaning of Judaism or orthodoxy or whatever that means, I don't really care. I think every person in their own life has to find what it means to them. And that's the whole point, because if we were supposed to be cookie cutter and put in a box and this is how things are supposed to be and supposed to look, then I don't think we'd be here. I don't think we'd have that. There would be no purpose for us, right? So I think if you truly believe that there's a purpose for you in this world and it's to find it better or to leave it better than you found it, then the best way to do that is to be a good person and try and help other people along the way. And also see, I think it helps also because, you have days that are extremely humbling, where you're getting rejected 5 times a day from different on-air jobs or even like social media jobs. And you're like, man, I've built this whole career. How am I getting rejected from something like this still? And then you have days where you feel on top of the world, like I did when I walked out of that WFAN studio after hosting a 5-hour show the first time. And so that your life is not a roller coaster, the only way to stay level-headed is to understand that the good things and the bad things, are all part of a bigger plan and a bigger picture. And without them, you can't live and you can't survive, day to day, because I promise you, anyone who is trying to survive on the highs and lows will just collapse. It's impossible.
Wow, Rami, to be honest, I didn't bring you on here to be a motivational speaker, but like, I'm fired up right now. I don't know about you. Like, that is, I can't even tell you like how true it is. First of all, the Jew helping a Jew thing, I think that's so important. It's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because like, yeah, I'm a Jew who wants to help other Jews talk about their personal brand. I think Jews are such a unique group of people. And obviously I'm a Jew, so I'm biased, but like, I think we have such a unique story, and we're such an intertwined, interconnected community. And especially with everything that's going on right now, like, I'm sorry to say this, but like, it's Jews versus the world now. It's like we have nobody on our sides at this point. Like, even though there might be some people that are allies to us, like, it is up to us to fight our way through this anti-Semitic, like, horror, terror, whatever you want to call it, and advance in our careers. I think it's so important to stay level-headed, like you said, and when the highs are highs and the lows are lows, like, you just got to keep going, right? Like, before we got on air, or before we got on the podcast, or just as we got on the podcast, you're like, yeah, man, after I finish my WFAN segment, I would like to my fantasy baseball segment. Like, that's hustle, man. Like, how do you stay motivated like that?
It's crazy, but the motivation is seeing the result. And that's the scary part, because there are days and months where you're not making any money and you're trying to figure out, what am I doing and why is this even worth it? And so you have to find those little peaks, because there's a lot of valleys. So you have to find those little peaks that keep you going, keep you motivated. And I said, like, that hosting that show, that's going to keep me going for a while. That's going to keep me motivated for a while. But back to the previous conversation, just if I can for one second, it's one more thing. I do think if you stay true to yourself also, and people see it. I had just an interesting story with a boss where, my hours were inputted incorrectly. This was a boss a while ago, and it was, I was getting paid by the hour at this job, and my hours were being inputted incorrectly. And, the last time that happened with someone, they fired them on the spot because they thought that they were trying to, steal money from the company. And with me, I was like, hey, I really don't know what happened here. I'm not sure. And he's like, well, I've seen how you are and how, you're true to your values in regards to your Judaism. So I can't, he's like, I have a tendency to trust you, and it basically saved my job. So it's just like stories like that keep me, like you said, what keeps me motivated. That's like, okay, maybe I am here for a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to be here. Maybe if I can help someone else along the way, that's ultimately the goal. And like I said, like paying it forward is ultimately the goal. And now, because I have so many people behind me, especially this week where people had never heard of me before in the last 3.5 years, as I'm, working 24-hour days, trying to make this work for me for 365, every holiday, every weekend. And these people have never heard of me. And then all of a sudden, one day, they hear a Jewish kid on WFAN, and they're like, oh my God, there's this Jewish kid on WFAN. And all of a sudden to them, it's like, oh, I showed up today because that's when I came into their lives,
Right.
and they're like, they don't know what went into it before that. But that's part of the motivation too, is because now it's not just me, who I'm working for. It's everyone else who feels like I would let them down if I didn't keep going, if I didn't try and keep pushing. And so to me, that's part of it. That's when you have that sense of community, like you talked about with us sticking together, and you have a full community that builds you up to that point, then you have to keep going, because you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting everyone else down too, it feels like.
Wow. That's awesome. That is, I love that. So going back to your Jewish faith a little bit here, how do you, Rami, strengthen your relationship with God on a day-to-day basis?
Like I said, I mean, really it's trying to find divine intervention in things, trying to see things for a way that they are. When I first started in this industry, I got a call from Tracy Brandeis, who was the brand manager at Odyssey in Baltimore. And she basically called me for like 15 minutes and tried to talk me out of applying for the job in the first place. And it was a sales job at the time. And she basically tried to talk me out of it. I don't even know if we talked about my background. Like I said, I was totally not on the sports side. And then during the pandemic, I decided I wanted to get into sports. And I applied for a sales job at Odyssey.
Right.
So, when she called me and was like, hey, this job's not for you, essentially, I was like, all right, but I think it can be. And I convinced her. And then she's like, okay, whatever. Kevin Friedman is the sales manager. He'll give you a call next week. And when he gave me a call, he was essentially like, hey, I don't even know why Tracy called you. Your resume sucks. Your background you have no experience in this area, but I guess, somehow your resume, she just was going through resumes and she called whatever number was on her desk. So it was essentially like almost an accident that she called me in the first place. But then, of course, as you can hear from the name, Kevin Friedman, we hit it off immediately. And we talked for an hour, didn't talk about the role at all. Became best friends. He's like, oh yeah, here's where I went to, here's where I went to Hebrew school, here's where my parents taught me, and here, all that stuff. And I was like, incredible. And ultimately we became close. They didn't hire me, but 3 months later, because of this relationship that I maintained with him, they did hire me. And so I don't even remember what the question was, but I think you said about finding it day to day in your life. That's how you find it in your life. It's things as simple as talking to God. I don't know, I'm circling for a parking spot in the city for 45 minutes. I use a parking spot right about now, and seeing kind of a hand in things. And sometimes there are days where I'm like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Or I'm like, oh, this is all BS. Come on, there's no way. And then, there are other days where it's stronger, and that's part of the journey. I think, the ups and the downs, and trying to find some sort of meaning and higher power is extremely important. There are days where, like I said, it seems like there is no higher power. And then there are days that it's so clear that there is. And, you have to, I guess the struggle is the day to day.
I think going back to your point about circling in the city, finding a parking spot, like I often find myself like, and Max and I talked about this in our second episode, where he was telling us a story of how he was literally like praying mincha at Yankee Stadium, and like the Yankees started doing well. And like, but like seriously, there are times in your lives, and like, sometimes I don't even notice it, but where you'll ask Hashem, you'll ask God for something and he'll deliver. I mean, God always delivers in every way, I like to believe, but I think there are moments in your lives where, you know, you're in a time of desperation, whether it's something so little as a parking spot or something so big as, like, God forbid, somebody in your family being sick, and Hashem delivers. Like, I feel like it's just a thing.
And you'll be shocked because, you know, Max, I love Max, but God doesn't care about the Yankees. But
Yes.
But I will tell you, and I can guarantee this, more than any speech any rabbi gave me in any yeshiva, the one thing that made me believe in God more than anything in the world was Aaron Rodgers getting hurt on the 4th play of the season, because I know God hates the Jets. There is no way. Like, it was supposed to be perfect. Like, how does that happen 4 plays in? Like, if there's anything that makes you believe, that made me believe more than anything else, because I was like, wait, no. The 4th play,
God.
like, because the Jets were supposed to be good, but of course that couldn't happen. All logic would tell you, all, like, sanity, the way of the world, natural, science, evolution, everything that happened in the world would tell you that the Jets would have been good with Aaron Rodgers. But that is divine intervention. When I talk about divine intervention, God coming down on that field at MetLife Stadium. We saw the rainbow. You know, the rainbow's supposed to be a symbol. I posted on my Instagram, and I have the story. I could find it. I could repost it. I posted the picture of the rainbow before game time. There was a rainbow over MetLife Stadium the day of that Monday Night Football game. And I wrote, "This is a sign. I don't know what it means. I have a feeling it's going to be bad." And 2 hours later, Aaron Rodgers was sitting on the field with a snapped Achilles. God came down and snapped it himself. So yeah, if you don't believe in God, watch the Jets. Be a Jets fan for a week. Or I see, are you, you're from Minnesota? Is that Anthony Edwards behind you? Yeah. So be a Vikings fan for a week and tell me God doesn't, you know, exactly. You know, my friend, Greg Giannotti, hosts the morning show with Boomer Esiason on WFAN. He also, Vikings fan. Tell me God doesn't exist after being a Vikings fan for however long you've been a Vikings fan, or being a Jets fan. Try being a Jets fan for a week and tell me God doesn't exist.
Rami, you know what? I feel like you're the first guest on my podcast that we can share the torture and heartbreak of our football teams. I mean, I have a very close friend who's a Jets fan, and we feel each other's pain. I mean, it is unbelievable how Aaron Rodgers, who used to be my arch nemesis, like, I grew up hating Aaron Rodgers. Like,
well, be careful. He's gonna be. You know how this works. He's gonna be a Viking soon enough. That's how it works with the former Packer quarterbacks.
I mean, listen.
Happened with Favre.
Bobby, you never know. Aaron Rodgers comes on the TV, automatic middle finger. Like, I don't care. Like, I see him. He was my arch nemesis, and I see him on the Jets. I'm like, okay, like, I can actually cheer for this guy. You know, good guy. Torture the Vikings for a little bit. You know, I want to see him do good on the Jets. I picked in my dynasty league. I'm like, I think the 10th overall pick, and it was a 10-man league. And beginning of the second round, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Garrett Wilson. He's going to have a great year. He's going to have Aaron Rodgers. He's going to ball out. And listen, Garrett Wilson, for his quarterbacks, he had a great year. But man, oh man.
The fact that Garrett Wilson had 1,000 yards, considering with Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian, and Zach Wilson, like, that is insanity. The dude is special. Like, that's crazy stuff.
I was telling everybody, like, he is going to be up there with I think this year, assuming, like, knock on wood, Rodgers is healthy and the Jets look good. Like, he is going to be up there and competing with Jefferson for the best wide receiver in the league. He's got.
Hey, and maybe they'll be on the same team, right? Some rumors. Minnesota doesn't want to give him a contract. I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. But hey, I didn't believe it with Tyreek Hill, and then next thing you know, he was traded. You know, so obviously Minnesota has the Cousins contract coming off the books. So there's no one they're paying a ton of money to, so it doesn't really make sense to me. But I get it. Like, I guess they don't want to give that giant wide receiver contract. The guy's been hurt a couple times. I don't know. So do I believe that they're, and Boomer keeps saying, and he's torturing Gio with this, he keeps saying that the Vikings are traded for Zach Wilson. So good luck with that. I hope that works out for you. He's a Mormon, so you know God hates him, you know? Just kidding. That's a joke. But yeah.
God, if we traded for Zach Wilson, I don't know what I would do. And I mean, I think the Vikings contract situation is an absolute mess. But I mean, Kirk is he's our guy. Like
him dancing at the NFL, like I don't know if you saw that. Like he looks great. He looks better than everyone was freaking out about how good Rodgers looked. And I saw Rodgers on the field, saying right next to him, he was playing catch with Cobb before a Monday Night Football game against the Chargers. And I saw him and he looked fine, but he wasn't dancing, 3-4 months after his surgery the way Kirk Cousins looked. I was like, oh my God, Kirk Cousins looks great. So, but it's funny because I was a huge Rodgers fan. I grew up with a Packers fan, one of my closest friends, and I loved Rodgers really from when the Jets lost in the AFC Championship game to the Steelers, and then Rodgers beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl.
right.
That made me a huge Rodgers fan, and I've been a huge Rodgers fan ever since. So him coming to the Jets was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is happening. It's unbelievable. And then my father came on my podcast. I got hired to do this podcast, to host this Jets podcast with a former Jets running back, Bilal Powell. And I'm like, this is going to be incredible. We have Aaron Rodgers. I'm hosting with a guy who I watched while I was in high school, who I watched play for the Jets. This is the greatest thing ever. And literally 4 plays in, my father comes on my podcast, and I played this on the radio actually the other day. My father comes on the podcast and goes, Rodgers is going to get hurt. He's like, I mean, look at this offensive line. He's like, I don't like the arrogance. I don't like how they're, the voice of God is coming down the helicopter. He's like, I just don't like the mojo. They're way too confident. He's like, I want them to be serious. Right. And this is not going to end well. Him standing behind that offensive line is like you or me standing in a 6-lane highway. And 4 plays in, my father was right. And my father loves the Jets. I mean, we were texting. I was at CBS Sports Radio in the middle of a live show watching the game, in the middle of the Zach Gelb show, another Jewish friend. And I'm watching the game from the production booth, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, this can't be happening. And I'm texting my father, and we're just like, this is it. And I couldn't work the rest of the night. Like I was so thrown off. I drove home. I was mad. I didn't even know, like, but I knew. That's when I knew God exists.
God exists. So before we get into more Jets heartbreak, let's talk about something a little bit more positive, Jets related. Awesome that you're doing a podcast with a former Jets running back. And I mean, I remember, I have very fond memories of Bilal Powell he was my waiver wire pickup a few weeks, like scored a couple touchdowns and, clutching my fantasy season. So what are you guys like continuing to do in terms of like promoting the Jets in a positive light? I mean, it's a hard thing to do, to have a podcast on the Jets. Like, man, that must be tough.
So what's funny is I mentioned Johnny Lazarus earlier in the show as someone who I reached out to cold, didn't know who he was. And he, was like, hey, Jews help Jews. We became friends, and he works for a company called Believe. He hosts a podcast for them, a Rangers podcast. And he's all over the place. He's on Bleacher Report, on NHL.com, everywhere. Mostly New York Rangers related. And he actually was, because he hosted the podcast for Believe, that's how I knew what the network was. And I saw they were trying to start a Jets podcast, and they were looking for a host. And I reached out to Johnny. He reached out to them. We all connected. And I somehow got, this job, and it's crazy, but it's crazy how things like that come full circle. He's said to me since, which is crazy, I don't feel this way, but he's like, you don't know how much you've helped me when you reached out to me as like someone who was like a veteran in the industry. He's like, it gave me the confidence to be like, oh, I could help someone else out. He's like, I'm already at that point. So you don't know when you feel like you're doing something, you don't know what you're doing for others at the same time. And I can't take any credit for that. Like I said, his career has been incredible. But he helped me get that job. And Believe basically reaches out to me and is like, hey, we're working on a co-host for you. And then one day it's like, hey, here's Bilal Powell's cell phone number. Text him, give him a call, tell him you're excited to be on board. And I'm like, Bilal Powell, waiver king? You know what I mean? And like, this is the guy who was saving fantasy league late in seasons. And he was one of my favorites, and he's a Jets fan favorite. The way we've done it, and maybe it's not, the typical when you're talking about like Jet or really any team specific podcast, people want to hear the nitty gritty and like, oh, who's their, 12th string punter this week, and who's they're going to be their 7th round draft pick and rank 90,000 people that are on the practice squad. That's not exactly how we do the show. We're more like, hey, we understand the agony. And I always make fun of Bilal. I'm like, you've only been a Jet fan for 3 years. Like, yeah, you were on the team for 9 years, sure, but that's different. You've only been a fan for 3 years. Like, no. We always argue who's more tortured, him who was like had to be a part of the dysfunctional organization, or me who's had to watch it for 20 years. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and he's like, man, it sucks. I'm like, tell me about it. But we try and have fun. We have some of his, we've had Kenny Albert on, also great Jew, who obviously big broadcaster. We've had a bunch of former athletes on, a lot of Bilal's former teammates, just, constantly trying to make it fun. That's been the biggest thing for us, not to dwell on like, oh, wow, they cut their third string tight end today. Let's have a 20-minute conversation about that.
Right.
Obviously, we want to cover the important informational topics as well, and be informational for everyone. But again, we're just trying to have fun and make light of the situation, because otherwise, I mean, it's tough.
It is tough. So going back to what you were saying about having Bilal's former teammates on and former pro athletes, who has been like the most memorable celebrity athlete that you've met during your career in sports media?
So there are a few guys, I guess, but it's different because some of them are during my career, some of them are not at all during my career, because I grew up with family passes to Madison Square Garden a couple of times, going to meet some athletes. It's actually funny. One of the guys who I had a conversation with, who I thought was just the nicest guy, honestly, was Kyrie Irving.
Wow.
I know. Not a popular take, especially in the Jewish community. But dude was world class. Yeah. Talked to me and my father for like a half hour, just hanging out. But that's besides the point. Definitely feels like he thinks he's the smartest in the room. But Carmelo Anthony was one of those guys who, like, I grew up, I loved Melo. And then when I got to meet him, I was probably like 18 or 19 years old. And just getting to hang out with him for a couple minutes was super cool also. But again, this was all before my career in this industry. It was actually really cool when I worked in Baltimore at the radio station there, and like Justin Tucker just showed up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he just walked into the radio station one day. And like, again, he could walk around Baltimore or anywhere really, and no one would know it. He just looks like pretty much like a white dude. You know what I mean? He's just like, he's not big. He's like, but he's literally the greatest kicker ever, like statistically. So that's unbelievable. But a couple of guys. Well, first of all, I work with Boomer every day, and he's super cool. And Tiki Barber, also just the nicest guys. Like, Tiki is awesome. Tiki is one of the greatest people you'll meet. But meeting Pedro Martinez, when he walked in, I remember I was working at MLB, and he walked in one day, and he didn't walk in with like an entourage or anything. He just was alone. He just walks in, but he had this presence about him. He was a little dude, and he's like tiny. He's probably like 5'8", maybe all of like 180 pounds. And he walks in, and he had this presence about him, not just because he has this huge smile, but like there was some like sort of like he walks in, everyone like kind of turns like, oh, Pedro, you know what I mean? And he's like, hello, like all like, so super cool to see someone who like commands a room that way. And then if I could throw in one, because like I said, I'm an aspiring broadcaster, so one for me that was just incredible was Mike Breen. It was my favorite broadcaster. Obviously does Knicks play-by-play, and does obviously the NBA Finals on ABC. And when I met him, it was super cool. I was on the court at Madison Square Garden, and he was walking out of his exit on one side of the court, and I was kind of being led and nudged by security towards the other side of the court to go. And he saw that I was kind of trying to wait for him, and he put his stuff down. He had his bag to his security guard with him, and he walked across the whole court, the long way, because he saw me waiting, to come introduce himself. And he walked over to me, and I was speechless. I didn't even know what to say to him. I was, just starting in this industry, and he walked over to me and sticks his hand out and goes, Mike Breen, I'm Mike Breen, nice to meet you. What's your name? I'm like, what do you mean nice? Of course I know who you are. You know what I mean? He's introducing himself. And we talked for a few minutes about the industry, about my career, trying to grow. And, he was the nicest guy, so encouraging. And then we took a picture together, and that was the one time we met. But it was one of those cool experiences that you'll never forget. Because that like meant so much. And, when now when I watch the end, he's the most genuine, just nicest dude you'll ever meet. And that's so cool because this is the guy who has achieved everything and has earned everything and worked his way up. And, when he talks about how lucky he is and how privileged he is and how fortunate he
Right.
is. And that's someone who really, he like, just seeing that humility with someone like him is remarkable. And it's something that, like I said, you aspire to be. I want to be that person that if one day I make it, whatever the hell that means, and the goalpost is moving every day, so who knows. But, somebody was happy enough to meet me and said the same things about me, that, oh, he was genuine and he felt like he was so fortunate to be there and he was so humble. Like, that's what I would want someone to say about me. And the fact that I could say that about him is super cool. And I mean it, because there's nobody, from everyone I've met, there was nobody like him. So not an athlete, but probably the coolest moment I've had.
Wow. Bang. That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, he's the best. And I met Cece a bunch of times. Cece's really fun. Cece's Sabathia, but totally different vibe,
Wow. That's great, man. It seems like you've met like literally every athlete in the world now.
I don't know if everyone, but New York is kind of a center for media and sports. And so, yeah, I've met a lot of them. I've gotten to, especially being at WFAN, where you have, guys coming in from everyone from, Alex Rodriguez to, to Trevor Bauer coming in for interviews. Literally, he was in, I saw him a few weeks ago. He came in for an interview.
That's amazing. So, Rami, I know we've talked a lot about kind of like the fun behind sports. Like, you've gotten to meet all these amazing guys. You get to talk about the Jets all day. You get to do these really cool things on WFAN and talk about sports to literally the entire world. But I want to talk about, for a second, the hours in sports. You're waking up at ridiculous hours when you're working in sports. You're working, 15, 16, sometimes even like 20-hour shifts, right? The hours in sports is so grueling, and a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into, a production, a baseball game, whatever it is. Like, there's so much work that needs to be done in order for it to move flawlessly. So how do you, stay focused when you're working these crazy hours and crazy long shifts?
The number one thing is to remember like the goal, for sure. But also to realize how fortunate I am to be where I am. Like, considering my background, considering what I've done. Again, I've worked for this. I think I've earned everything that's been given to me. But at the same time, for me, I'm extremely fortunate. And so trying to remember that. And so when I'm sitting there on New Year's Eve while all my friends, and I had tickets to Billy Joel and I couldn't go, and all my friends are out, and, I'm probably and again, I'm sitting in a studio with maybe one other person at 3:00 in the morning. It's not easy, but you remember why you're there and what made you want to do that in the first place. And you're like, all right, there could be worse things. And like I mentioned earlier, and it's such a difficult thing because I never want to discourage anyone. Like, one of my big things is there were so many people who, when I reached out to them, almost it felt like they were trying to discourage me from even attempting this career. And I would never want to do that. Because I think everyone should try it. If they feel like they could be great at something, they should take that chance, take that opportunity and chase it. But understand that the work, you have to love the work and everything that goes into it as much as you would love the end result, because there's going to be those days that it sucks. And, like I said earlier, so many people found out who I was 2 days ago. Sunday morning, They listened to WFAN and they heard a Jewish kid on the radio and they were like, oh my God, this is great. And, I've had people who I never met, never heard of before reach out to me, and it's humbling to have people reach out to me and be like, hey, I want to get to where you are. What do you do? How do I do it?
Right.
That's a humbling experience, but without trying to discourage them, what I want to say is, again, you met me yesterday or you heard of me yesterday, but you don't know the 3.5 years of work that went into it before that. And that's not to say you can't do it. You should do it, but you have to love that. You have to love that grind. You have to live it. I get home and it's okay. I'm editing the next thing. And, there's no difference between, there's no work hours. There's no, I mean, like you said, there are days that I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be in the city for the morning show. And there's days where I'm going to sleep at 6 a.m. after working a full overnight. So, or as it was on Sunday, I went to sleep at 11 a.m. after working a full overnight. So, you know, again, it's not the, I don't know, the glory or whatever that comes with it at the end is fun, but that's not the part that you live for, because that's what 1% of the whole experience, you know. And the meeting athletes and getting these opportunities to be at these events, meeting John Sterling and Susan Waldman, which is hilarious. Susan Waldman, who's, you know, the play-by-play for the Yankees. Her and John have been doing it for like 30 years. And Susan, we sat in the booth in between every inning and played Jewish geography, literally. Sat in the radio booth together as I was producing. And that, where, I mean, can you think of a more Jewish experience in your life? We're sitting with the perfect seat overlooking Yankee Stadium during a Yankee game, and every commercial break, she turns the headset off and turns to me, and we start playing Jewish geography. Like, that is the most Jewish experience you could ever have. I think. I don't know. I might be the only one who's experienced that experience, but I think that's the most Jewish experience you could ever have. And so all those things and all those moments are super fun and super cool, and they're definitely motivating. They help you keep you going. But if you're living for those moments, you're never going to make it, because if you don't love the day-to-day and the grind and the tough moments, that's what's going to ultimately, falling in love with that, the harder part, is what's going to keep you going, because that's the part that is 99% of every single day. And that's the part that's hard to stay motivated, and you have to keep going.
I think the best piece of life advice that like I've ever been given, and you're kind of like reiterating it right now, is follow your passion and find something that you're just really, really good at and pursue it. And obviously sports media in the beginning, like any profession, like you're not going to be making a lot of money. Like you're going to be making nothing, like minimum, sometimes even minimum wage. But you know, you really gotta love what you're doing to work in sports. It is a grueling business that, you know, it is so competitive. I mean, for once, I'm going to be honest here. I worked for the Maryland Athletics Department my sophomore year. And since I was, I want to say 14, 15 years old, like I wanted to work in sports. Like it is, you know, that's kind of like what my goal was. And I worked in sports for 1 year. And I was like, you know what? This might not be a thing for me. I mean, you know, I could go back and visit it eventually, but it is such a tough business to break into. And I think one thing that a lot of people are confused, you know, misinformed about is social media showing how quote unquote easy it is to work in sports. And Rami, I think you do a fantastic job on your social media showing how you're going to the office. I just saw a video on your LinkedIn. Like you're going to the office at like 3 a.m. You know, you're showing everybody your grind and your hustle, which I think a lot of people who work in sports just quite frankly don't show that. So my question to you is, how do you communicate your authenticity through your social media channels to show like Rami Lavi, like I'll put in this work to make sure that like I get to where I want to be? How do you continue to do that through social media?
Again, it's an effort, because I don't want to discourage anyone, and I also don't want to, you know, I'm not trying to brag about certain things. You know what I mean? Like, again, this is just my life, and this is what I've chosen for myself, and I love it. And like you said, like you have to love it to be able to do it. You know, and to me, and that is something that has always been from the time I'm a little kid. I can't deal with hypocrisy. I can't deal with anything fake. I try and be as authentic as possible. My first show on WFAN Sweatshirt said authenticity always wins, because that's something that I literally live by. I can't be fake. I can't deal with fake things. So something a boss told me, which is so interesting, and this is the last boss that I've had not in the sports industry. And you'll hear why he was that boss in a second. But he told me this almost as like a diss, and I took it as like an illumination, like an incredible, like eye-opening moment. He said to me at the time, I had just started my podcast, And over the course of the pandemic, I also started a food page, like cooking,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just for fun, like just messing around. Again, like I said, the pandemic was kind of crazy for all of us. And I do it for fun. I'm not trying to like be a chef or anything, but I call myself a chef online, and it is funny. So I started this food page, and I had this podcast, and my boss said to me, he said, if you put as much passion and energy into your work here as you did into your podcast and your hobbies, what he called it, you'd be really successful. That was like one of my last days at that job. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I should align my passions with what I'm doing for a living. And
Right.
so to me, that's for me, I couldn't be doing anything else. I couldn't, am I smart enough and capable enough in other fields and other areas to be successful? Sure. But I have to be doing something that I'm genuine about. I have to be doing something that I love, that I feel passionate about. So that's what I try and portray online, that
Right.
this is genuine. This is nothing you're seeing is fake. Like, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. There are some great days. There are some days that suck. There are some days that are really tough on your mental health. I saw somebody, who I follow online. She wrote something about, how she's trying to find a job now in sports. And she just, a lot of these jobs are contract jobs, and she's in between a couple of contract jobs and she can't find one. She's like, at what point of doing this year after year of, okay, one contract is up, now I have to try and find a new contract job, do I give up? And she's someone who's found a lot of success in her career. And seeing someone like that be so honest online also, which was like also eye-opening. Like, here's a really talented woman who's done so much in her career and accomplished so much, and she's going out there and saying, it's so tough on her mental health to then find the next thing. You know what I mean? To constantly be on the lookout and constantly be applying for jobs and constantly be trying to find new angles. And that's something that I feel like having other people who are in it with you, seeing shared experiences definitely helps. So I try and share my genuine experience. But again, it goes back to the whole thing. I couldn't be fake. I couldn't, if I tried to fake it, I would just fail, because like I said, that's why I'm in this industry in the first place, because this is what I authentically love to do. And when I got into it, part of my goal, like I said from the beginning, my goal from day one is, if I ever get to that point that people are looking up to me and reaching out to me, my goal would be to pay it forward and to try and help other people. That's really, again, I mean that sincerely. I'm not trying, I'm not fronting, I'm not BSing. Like, that's what I want to do. And I've made that a part of my story from day one. I said, because I can't start that when you're, I'll start helping people, I'll start paying it forward when I'm rich and famous, I want to start that today and do that now. And that was from day one, so that when I get to that point, if I ever do, that's already a major part of who I am.
I love it. I love the pay it forward. Like, that is, I feel like it's such a good core value to have in your, I guess, like, values portfolio, and just, we help everybody out. Like, it's what you got to do to, because I definitely been in the same position as you, where I've had many people come to me and help me out. So this is what I'm trying to do here. Pay it forward to all the proud Jews. Rami, before we let you go, I have one final question for you about your personal brand. So you're balancing a lot of things right now. I mean, you mentioned your food account. You have the Rami Lavi podcast. You have the In-Flight Snacks podcast. You're doing work for Better Sports and a million other things. How do you balance having your toes in 5, 6 different things at once? Like, how do you maintain, I guess, sanity and being able to focus on each individual thing throughout your day?
Not as well as I'd like to is the answer. But yeah, it's not easy. But again, for me, everything that I do is a passion project. So, it's finding time. It's making sure that you're staying on top of things. And sometimes, like I said, there's things that I wish I was more on top of. But that's the major part of it. That's the part of it that feels like you have to make priorities, obviously, and sometimes you have to choose between two things that are both things that are really close to you and are both a priority, but you have to, pick and choose your battles, and then try and stay level-headed throughout the whole thing and stay calm about it, because you can't get overly worked up about one thing, because there's going to be something else probably 2 minutes down the pipe. So you gotta always stay even keel, never get too high, never get too low, to use a sports metaphor, and just kind of go with it. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, Rami, thank you for coming on the podcast today. Where can people find you and your podcasts on social media?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This was awesome. This was really fun. And I'm on, I guess, Twitter or X at Rami_Lavi, and on Instagram at Rami.Lavi. And if you go there to either of those places, you'll find, a bunch of my podcasts. Like you said, the Jets podcast with Bilal Powell. I do a fantasy baseball podcast for Just Baseball. And then obviously my work with WFAN and my own personal podcast. So all that stuff is all over the place. But Rami Lavi, Jewish name, pretty easy to remember. So if you find me in any of those places, and hey, listen to WFAN, I'm on once in a while, apparently. So
let's do it. Well, everybody, I want you to go follow Rami. I mean, this was a great episode. I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Make sure, in addition to following Rami on socials, again, make sure you follow me on TikTok and Instagram. Follow the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening right now. We want to grow this. We want to have more Ramis on the podcast to fire you up while you're doing your morning walk or wherever you're listening to this. Until next time, keep schmoozing.